I just thought I'd make this quick video talking about the UK government's utterly backwards and asinine approach to the drug crisis that the UK currently faces. I think there was more drug overdoses on record in the last year since they first started tallying these sort of statistics. And yeah, it is a massive problem in the UK, as it is all over the world. Drug use, especially for working class or lower class people, is a real issue. Unfortunately, the UK government is so utterly backwards. Well, I mean, they're a Conservative government, so what more do you expect? They're so hooked up on this idea of punishment and fear that they don't see the real issue that is actually happening here. Is like, why do people use drugs? And a lot of the time it is to fill the void in their lives. They're chasing something, they're chasing happiness that they can't achieve within their own sober life. This is oftentimes why you find working class and lower class people who are entrenched in drug abuse problems. And the wonderfully intelligent and conscious Tory government has decided that they're now going to go after lifestyle users of Class A drugs, and that they'll target them as part of the government strategy to lessen the amount of demand there is for drugs. So it's a completely stupid way of doing it, isn't it, really? If you don't have to be a rocket scientist to realise that the war on drugs was a complete failure, and yet Boris is going back to the Thatcher, Reagan era attitude of punishment first rather than actually sorting out the root cause of the problem. And there's multiple factors for the problem of the drug crisis, and like I said before, poverty is a massive factor in it. People who don't have any meaning in their lives and literally just have to work unbelievable hours to survive all the time. What's their main release of dopamine? It's having a few lines of cocaine at the weekend at the pub, or just in the house, or even worse, taking synthetic cannabinoids because they can't afford to actually buy real bud. And also the fact that it's illegal makes it harder. But they don't want to think about this. They don't understand, because the whole point of Conservatives are extremely lower conscious people. And before you actually dispute it, it's everywhere. You don't even have to be a genius to see that the Tory party is full of extremely lower conscious, hyper capitalist minded people who don't really care about working class or just people in general. It's just all about exponential growth. It's all about punishment. It's all about fear based shit, because at the end of the day, the right wing is a fear governed political viewpoint. You can see it all throughout history. It's fear of the Jews with the Nazis. It's fear of fear of drug users with Reagan. It's all this. It's just governed by fear. And if you know anything about spirituality, you know that fear is an extremely low state of consciousness. So it's no wonder that the UK is doing all this. I've just read this thing here, and it says this is at least the 6th new drug strategy that a UK government has announced in the past quarter of a century, which obviously shows that their attitudes don't work. But funnily enough, the general public keeps voting them in because they don't have an actual clue how to sort this out, because they're not conscious or empathetic or understanding enough to realise what the actual problem of drug use is, and also how to solve it. And a big way to solve it is to go the method of other countries like Portugal, who are decriminalising drugs. The evidence is there. All you've got to do is look on Google. It takes you 10 minutes to look up, see how little overdose rates there are in that country, and see how little drug-based crimes there are since they decriminalised it. It obviously is the way to go. I mean, Germany's just decided they're going to legalise cannabis recreationally, I swear. The UK is really living in this strange late capitalist hellscape that Boris is. He's spearheading it. He wants to bring us back to Thatcher era conservatism, which is absolutely awful for the majority of people in this country. I mean, I could go on about how horrible the UK is for ages. Like, people can't even afford to move out of the house. People can't afford to pay rent or anything. Meanwhile, the rich get richer. And funnily enough, they just found 11 out of 12 lavatories in Parliament had traces of cocaine in them. So the timing of this drug strategy is pretty ironic when you take that into consideration. And yeah, just looking on The Guardian here, not a fan of The Guardian, but they sometimes do make good, they sometimes do produce good articles. And yeah, they've 6 readers sent in saying stuff like the government is driven by outdated attitudes. Every time in the last 20 or 30 years that there's been any kind of step towards changing drugs policy in anything other than a punitive sense, there is massive backlash from backbenchers and from the more narrow-minded Let's Lock Them Up brigade. And who do the Let's Lock Them Up brigade fall into on the political spectrum? The right-wing, conservative-minded people. And there is no disputing this. This is the facts, bro. This is the straight-up facts. There is no disputing the fact that conservative-minded voters are fear-based and extremely lower conscious when it comes to deep topics like why do people use drugs and why do people get hooked on them and how do we solve it. And the only way to solve it is through innovation and change, which is not what the Conservatives offer, because it's literally completely out of their realm of perspective. Like the whole point of conservatism is about traditional values. So why would they want to adopt more forward-thinking, progressive attitudes like in countries such as Germany or places like Scandinavia? And also what's absolutely disgraceful is the fact that they will try and penalise middle-class drug users who they think are the ones fueling this whole drug exploitation crisis. They want to penalise them by making anybody lose their passport or driving licence for using drugs, which is an unbelievably backwards war on drugs approach that has shown itself time and time again to not work and create more problems. So the deep irony here is that all the money that they're wasting on this is just going to backfire and shoot them in the foot, and we'll probably have an even worse drug crisis in the next 10 years. I mean, anyone in the UK who goes out maybe on the regular knows just how many people use cocaine and have cocaine problems, as well as drink problems, which they don't like to talk about. They think that's a completely separate issue. But it all boils down to, again, mutual factors. Why do people drink and get beat up? They want the dopamine release, they want some satisfaction, some meaning in life, and then they get hooked on that because it's a very easy way to create pleasure rather than doing something meaningful. But they can't do anything meaningful because they work shitty jobs, have bad wages, and generally live in like squalor. So what's the best way to get a nice short sweet fix of happiness? Is to have like a few lines of coke and get pissed out your head. The only good thing they've done with this drug strategy is to emphasise rehabilitation. That's actually strange that it's strange that this whole strategy, they've got like two polar opposite ideas, like, oh yeah, to solve drug Boris was like, to solve drug crisis we need to rehabilitate these absolute smackhead cunts, and on the other side it's like, to solve the drug crisis we need to lock up people and take away their passports for sniffing cocaine. So it's like, mate, what are you actually on about? It makes no sense at all. It's like he's trying to walk the line between, oh yeah, progressive like rehabilitation is going to sort everything out with the, no, we must destroy everyone with the power of justice and all this shit. So it's like, it'll just be a stalemate, won't it? There's no fine balance here. It's just complete and utter chaos. This is going to make things even worse. And there was no talk about how to help people who are younger and hooked on drugs and try and help them out, because maybe we need to pour more money into mental health services, or maybe, just maybe, pour money into psychedelic therapy, such as using psilocybin in therapeutic settings, which was, funnily enough, this Tory minister even said that the other month, and he was saying that we just can't ignore the effects of psilocybin. It's like fairs, even this like extremely fear-based, biased Tory bastard was like, oh yeah, we need to actually start doing this, because there's a certain point where you do have to, your consciousness does have to evolve, and it can't ignore the facts anymore. So yeah, this is going to be devastating for the UK and for the people who use drugs sensibly, and the people who use drugs like chaotically. Both of their lives are going to be fucked over by the outdated and frankly disgusting attitudes of the UK government and the police. I mean, if you've ever had an encounter with the police in the UK, they are absolute knobheads. Like, I know there's the police all over the world are like pretty much despised. I mean, I don't have a problem with police, like a policeman. Like, I don't judge them for being so like aggressive and unconscious, because they do have to deal with a lot of shit, and I empathise with them in a way, but how can we live in a loving society if police are so cold and distant and judgmental and just generally awful to encounter in any situation? Even when you've done nothing wrong, you think that, oh, this guy's just gonna fucking do me for no reason. It's absolutely disgraceful, and I just don't. This is just a complete waste of money from the UK. Like, we're already in an absolute crisis with Brexit and the pandemic, and this is just digging that hole even deeper. So karma will come back in spades to bite Boris and his cabal of weird-looking cunts. But unfortunately, we also have to suffer that karmic backlog as well, which is pretty awful for the people who really need help.